In the lowest stratum of the city lay an unregistered sector known as the Severance Node. From beyond a fissure in its structure, another wavelength had emerged, spilling into this space. This was a place beyond the reach of all records, a fringe of the city where the control of L.I.S. could barely extend, the outermost edge of the urban domain. The fissure itself was like a wound carved into the fabric of space. At first it appeared faint, no more than a wavering blur, but as time passed, its density deepened, widening slowly like a split in the stitching that bound one space to another. In the air of the Severance Node, the temperature near it dropped to an unnatural chill, and the flow of particles twisted back upon itself in strange countercurrent eddies. It wasn't that something was coming here, it was seeping through, toward this side. That alien sensation crept under Yuto's skin, sinking slowly into him. Yuto had stepped into the blank stretch of land where navigation went silent. There was no functioning illumination here. The surroundings were wrapped in a dimness like dense fog that had seeped into the air itself. On the bare structural walls, the remnants of old record terminals clung alongside a web of dead wiring, their surfaces dull and lifeless. The floor beneath his feet was coated in a coarse material, and with each step a faint echo traveled forward, swallowed by the depths ahead. The air moved in uneven currents, carrying subtle eddies of temperature shifts and fine particulate matter that brushed against his skin. Delayed echoes and warped resonance disrupted the rhythm of his thoughts, erasing any reliable sense of distance or depth. Lingering traces suggested this place had once been something, had once served some function, yet now whatever meaning it held had long since dissolved, drifting like debris in the hollow. It happened in that instant. Something brushed against every one of his senses. Not skin, not sound. Rather a wave-like interference, particles stirring particles. Yuto halted, and in the space before thought, he understood. Someone. Unseen. Unheard. Yet in the depths of perception, a presence pressed closer. At its center was a single core. It had no form, neither light nor darkness, but a compressed domain of information. Like a black hole, it warped the data around it, replacing Yuto's sight, hearing, even touch with the illusion of his own memories. He saw it, yet its shape existed only within his recollection, beyond the reach of words, and still there was no mistaking it. It was there. His vision warped, his hearing refused to settle, and in the tangle of every sense, he found himself taking one step after another, drawn toward the core of existence. There was a strange delay before the sound of his own footsteps reached his ears, as if the timeline of sound itself had slipped out of alignment. With the space around him impossible to grasp in any fixed way, he sharpened his awareness to the faint irregularity in the wavelengths, using those subtle distortions as his guide, trying to pinpoint the location of it. And then, in his mind, a strange word surfaced: Yelea. It was not memory, nor was it mere information. It was as if the thing itself was laying that name directly across Yuto's consciousness, declaring what it was. The core began to take a shape. Yelea. It was a presence suspended somewhere between the abstract and the material.
At its center floated a crystal-like transparent sphere, within which faint particles of light spun in irregular orbits. Encasing the sphere's outer edge was a thin membrane of rippling energy, not a fixed physical boundary, but a contour forever on the verge of being defined, wavering as if it might slip into another form at any moment.
Beyond that, fibrous structures reminiscent of a plant's creeping vines extended into the surrounding space, reacting to the particle information around them by shifting in hue and luminosity. Their movements, though faintly tentacle-like, carried no intent to seize. Rather, they were delicate probes, as if reading the environment itself. The whole gave the impression of a single living organism, and yet it also possessed a quality akin to a landscape. Its outline and the feelings it evoked seemed to shift with the observer's state of mind, so that in the very instant it was perceived, its form would already be subtly different in the mind's memory.
"What did you see?" Yuto's voice was hoarse, carrying a faint tremor as if he himself wasn't certain of the question. Akina narrowed her eyes slightly, holding her silence for a moment before answering. Something was there, but I couldn't see it clearly. And you? What about you?" Still looking down, Yuto tilted his head just slightly. "A transparent sphere. I think there was light swirling at its center, but I can't say for sure that any of it was real." Akina stepped closer, placing her hand against the wall, and let out a slow, low breath. "To me, it looked like layer upon layer of petals, soft but with no fixed outline." Yuto turned, his gaze meeting hers. "We're looking at the same thing, but seeing something completely different? Does that mean it's reacting to the way we perceive it? It felt like I was seeing it through someone else's memory, not with my own eyes." Her words made Yuto draw in a quiet breath. The two of them mulled over each other's accounts, sharing that uncanny sense as though testing the very reliability of reality itself. It was not certainty, but confirmation. Neither version sought to claim the mantle of truth. If anything, both hinted at the absence of truth altogether. Depending on the perceiver's unique sensory traits, Yelea left an entirely different impression each time. That was Yelea.
The third presence, a being that resonated with information itself, yet possessed no culture of record. And now Yelea was observing Yuto. No, perhaps it was not even observation. What he felt was more akin to an instinct to probe, utterly devoid of will or intention. Yelea traced the outline of existence itself, its motion like a scan along the flow of information particles hovering just above Yuto's skin. It was like mist brushing against his shape, never truly touching, yet leaving behind a sensation that something had seeped deep into his nerves. It was not merely examining his external structure, but probing the very definition of his being, the determination of whether the information that constituted him should exist at all. It did not touch his self, it touched his outline. And if the outline were broken, the existence would be defined.
In that instant, a violent wave of rejection surged through Yuto. "Stop!" The unformed cry burst forth as a wave, and the space around him warped. Air compressed, as if cracks were spreading through glass. Fine lines of light raced across his field of vision with a faint creak. The bonds between particles loosened for a heartbeat, and as structural stress exceeded its limit, the seams of space began to tear open. It was a primal fear, fear of being recorded, of having his undefined existence overwritten, filled in by someone else's knowledge. Yelea stilled, if only for a heartbeat, not because of intent, merely because that change had reached it, and its movements had quieted in response. And then, as the aftershocks of Yuto's wave of rejection faded, a minute shift stirred within Yelea's central core. The rotation of information particles halted for the briefest instant, and in the next, a faint resonance echoed through Yuto's being.
It was not language. Yet what surfaced in Yuto's mind was something like a symbol, something like a concept, an understanding. I understand. This is something that must not be harmed. This is not me. The motes of light drifting around Yelea's core began, little by little, to take shape, forming, almost in imitation, the outline of a human figure. Not a voice, not a wavelength, but this time it was Yuto's perception itself that caught the words. You are Yuto. Halting but unmistakable. Yelea had recognized Yuto.
Through this contact, Yelea learned that it was possible to respond to the unknown act of contact with humanity by imitating and constructing an information structure, and she began preparing for further dialogue. Her mimetic form incorporated Yuto's language, expressions, and mannerisms, gradually establishing a perceptual framework closer to that of a human being. From this moment onward, Yelea was prepared to engage in mutual communication with humanity. Silence. And yet within that silence, something inside Yuto still wavered. Who was he? He who had once agonized over not being recorded had now rejected being defined. If this world held such a thing as the concept of proof, then perhaps this unrecorded contact occurring here and now was the truest testimony to his existence. Unseen by anyone, yet undeniably, he alone had touched that. It would leave no trace in any external record. But more than the act of recording itself, it was the inner record, the way his body had reacted in that moment, how his awareness had wavered, and how something had been left imprinted upon his heart. That, for Yuto, was his first true proof of existence. Far away, in the upper tiers of L.I.S., a faint ripple was detected, a minute anomaly, too subtle for anyone to notice. And yet, the world itself remembered that Yuto's existence had begun something.
Syntactic boundaries and the external rejection field. Why the city remains quietly protected. Nox Terra. Upon this planet lies scattered clusters of recorded cities known as L.I.S. Beyond their perimeters stretch the untamed natural zones, unregistered territories known as the primal layer and the intermediate layer. In those places, life forms persist according to laws unlike those that shaped our own evolution, and unrecorded informational structures continue to breathe and move untouched by the city's order. Threats and necessity. One of the reasons the L.I.S. cities were conceived was to shield humanity's sphere of civilization from the interference of the outside world. Toxic pollen, magnetobiological organisms that disrupt informational stability, colossal predatory life forms, and then informational waveforms yet to be classified, the so-called third existence. Any of these could become an unpredictable variable to the city's order. Defensive mechanism, external rejection field. For this reason, each L.I.S. deploys, as part of its city-wide syntactic network, the external rejection field, colloquially known as the syntactic boundary barrier. This is not a physical barricade. Rather, it applies the same urban syntax framework that defines existence through record to create a condition in which the city does not appear to exist at all to external entities.
Mechanism: the unobserved city. Within the city, existence itself is defined by syntactic particles. In contrast, any unregistered entity or waveform approaching from outside is unable to interface with that syntax. As a result, their perception renders the urban zone as a space where nothing exists. No light, no sound, no meaning, nothing at all. An infinitely spreading void, a worthless space without value. This is the defensive effect of the syntactic boundary.
In this way, colossal predators, as well as informational life forms from the primal layer, will, before ever reaching the city, judge it to be a place of nothing and turn away. It does not block intrusion, it prevents recognition altogether. The L.I.S. cities process all potential threats as unrecorded phenomena, placing even their own existence outside the bounds of meaning, and in so doing, quietly preserve their order. Records are not merely a means of preserving the past. It is only through being recorded that something gains meaning. This is the way of the city.